Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Igor Tkalec. I'm a research associate for the Global South project at the Robert Schuman Center of the European University Institute. Today, I'm going to present a paper on which my co-author, Professor Gaby Umbach, and myself have been working on. The title of the paper is Politicization of Scientific Evidence, a comparative analysis of the Irish abortion referendum, Brexit, and COVID-19. I should note that the paper is very much work in progress. Therefore, our results and our conclusions are still preliminary. Our paper aims to contribute to the evidence-informed policy-making body of literature. I'm sure that you are familiar with this concept. However, I would like to reinstate two notions that are important for our analysis. The first one is that the evidence is the link between knowing and governing, between scientific knowledge and experts and decision makers, and therefore, as such, evidence is subject to public scrutiny. The second notion is that the practices of selection, usage, and evaluation of evidence are the key to understanding of a policy problem or to construct a truth around the policy issue and also around the solutions. In this context, decision makers and political actors predominantly can prefer one type of evidence over another, depending on what kind of truth they wish to construct around an issue. Within the evidence-informed policy-making literature, we identified a gap which is simultaneously a critique of the approach and critique of the concept, and that is that often studies of evidence-informed policy-making disregard contexts, in particular political and policy context in which policy debate is going on, or policy reform, policy change is occurring. Therefore, in our analysis, we focus on crisis environments and we understand them as policy-making contexts. And on the political side, to account for this political part of contextualization, contextualization of evidence, of course, we use politicization as the dependent variable. Hence, our research question is, to what extent was politicization of expert knowledge present in distinct policy evidence arenas understood as crisis? So, crisis, what do we mean by crisis? We equalize crisis and policy environments. For the purposes of our analysis, we can understand crisis as a threat to the established core values of a system and a system of a polity, and we particularly focus on three such crises or policy contexts or policy environments. The first one is Irish abortion referendum. We understand it as a cultural religious crisis. The second one is Brexit, systemic or political crisis. And the third one is COVID-19, health crisis. So the crisis and policy environments capture our the input side of our analysis. The output side of our analysis is, of course, politicization, which is the act of transferring an issue into the field of politics. We distinguish between two types of politicization. The first one is inclusive and refers to a proper use of evidence within a policy debate, and which can be understood as a positive side of politicization, and the partisan politicization, which is a negative side and refers to misuse and or misinterpretation of evidence or usage of evidence for partisan or political interests. The guiding assumption for the analysis is that inclusive politicization will be more prominent, so positive side of politicization will be more prominent in crisis or in policy environments with tangible effects on human well-being. This is primarily COVID-19 and also secondarily Irish abortion referendum. We frame the research question and our analysis into the most different comparative case study design, as our three cases are vastly different, especially according to these general features such as level, actor, aim, and impact. They're vastly different. However, they have one common feature, which is the presence of a crisis. So they represent some sort of crisis, as I said, cultural religious, in Irish case, health crisis in COVID and systemic or political crisis in Brexit case. Even though these crises are different, the fact that there are crises that represent a significant change within a society or societies, we capture this as a common feature of this policy context of our cases. As such, we kind of understand the crisis or disruption of polity as a non-causal difference maker that can explain the presence and subsequently the effects of politicization of expert knowledge in these particular cases. Data and method. So we, as I already mentioned, we analyze newspapers data, so newspaper articles, and more specifically sentences within these articles. That's why the main method of in this paper is core sentence analysis. Each core sentence represents subject's opinion of an issue. An issue is object. So in our case, the objects are always, or object categories are always statements about evidence or expert knowledge in particular policy contexts. Each core sentence has a few elements. First one, subject, so the author or the owner of the statement. The second one is direction, so that is the sentiment or statement or attitude toward an object. It can be positive 1, neutral 0, or negative -1. And of course, there's an object. An object is basically what what a subject is talking about. And we, in our case, we focus on evidence and expert knowledge as the main objects that we are trying to detect and then analyze. To give an example, there's a fictitious sentence. Boris Johnson said that the UK government follows the expert advice for designing post-Brexit economic policy. So in this sentence, subject would be Boris Johnson. Direction would be 1 because Boris Johnson said something positive about expert knowledge and evidence. And object per se, grammatical object would be UK government follows the expert advice. But we put that grammatical objects. We put these grammatical objects into object categories, and for example, in this case, could be the category could be defined as using or referring to evidence. The sample. So what exactly do we analyze? So for each case, we select 4 to 5 news outlets. We try to balance between tabloids and serious newspapers, and maybe even left-right dimensions, so our results are not biased. Factiva was the main source where we got our data, and there we used these combinations of search words to get the articles. Obviously, search words are explain the core of the each case or each policy context, and we ended up with 116 core sentences. For Irish case, it's important to know that not each sentence is a core sentence. Not even sentences that have evidence or expert that are objects in our case are core sentences, because statement about evidence and expert has to directly be concerned with the policy context. So with the abortion referendum, with the COVID-19, and with the Brexit. So we ended up with 116 core sentences with Ireland, 198 sentences, core sentences for Corona, but this is only for 20% of the sample. Important to note, all the same is for Brexit, 100 sentences, core sentences out of 20% of the sample. So this number will significantly increase when we actually analyze the whole sample. We calculate the salience for each of the case, and salience is the proportion of core sentences in the corpus of sentences that contain expert and or evidence in them. And expectedly, the Corona has the highest salience than of 0.84. 1 is maximum, 0 is minimum. And Brexit has the lowest. That means that even though when in an article, evidence or expert word appears, it's not directly referred to the Brexit it's referred to some other topic. Results. The first main result is that the direction, the sentiment, the attitude towards evidence, to our objects, evidence and expert knowledge is positive. And this is both, this holds both for political and non-political actors. It's positive, and basically the attitudes of political and non-political actors are very similar. They follow similar patterns. As you can see, especially the largest gap between the positive and the negative sentiment is for the coronavirus case, of course, because as we expect, because it has the immediate impact of human well-being. We expect when we analyze 100% of a sample that the negative direction or negative sentiment towards evidence and expert would increase in the Brexit case, because Brexit has been highly politicized, especially in the media. Moving on, so who is making the statements and what are the affiliations of the subjects? So basically, we find that media and experts, the main actors of making the statements about evidence and expert knowledge. And as you can see, luckily or fortunately, in the Corona case and the Irish case, health sector, which includes university professors, scientists, experts, public health researchers, and so forth, was very prominent in the debate within these policy contexts. And of course, the important thing is that this is dominance of non-political actors. Government is present here in the Irish case within parliamentary committees, and in the, of course, Brexit case where politicians make statements on Brexit. Moving on, so object categories. Object categories, as I already said, are capture what is being said about evidence or expert knowledge. So in our case, we have this using evidence, selecting experts, and lack of evidence as the most frequent categories. Using evidence, self-explanatory. So an actor, a subject is saying something, is referring to evidence, uses evidence in its presentation or presentation of his or her argument. Selecting experts are statements about the experts or the credibility of experts talking about the issues, and lack of evidence is the need. So subjects state the need for more evidence, for more research on certain topics. That's especially prominent in Corona. And then we have this, what you could understand as the negative side of politicization, rejecting evidence and biased evidence. Biased evidence, of course, using politics against evidence, or and rejecting evidence, self-explanatory, rejecting what has been said by experts. To conclude, so those are the preliminary conclusions. As I mentioned before, first, inclusive politicization is dominant over partisan politicization in all cases. Therefore, our guiding assumption, moreover, our guiding assumption has been confirmed that the crises with the direct impact on human well-being are less politicized, or inclusive politicization is more prominent in them than the crisis or Brexit crisis that is not directly that does not directly impact on human well-being. Third conclusion is that political and non-political actors have predominantly positive statement, opinion, attitudes towards evidence and expert knowledge. And lastly, frequency of object categories does not significantly differ between political and non-political actors. That means that political and non-political actors are talking about the same thing when they refer to evidence and expert knowledge. So therefore, their attitudes and the topics they are talking about, they follow similar patterns. That will be all. I'm looking forward. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward for your questions and feedback on the paper and how to proceed, and hopefully we'll have a fruitful discussion. Thank you once again. Goodbye.